My goals for Unit 8 were to get a distinction, but more than that I wanted to enlighten the general public on a sport that deserves a lot more recognition. I'm sending my documentary to Bowls England so they can use it for something. I want to make my documentary good, not just for me, but for my club as well, as I want to make sure that Ivor Heath is represented well, and hopefully the people from my club enjoy the documentary. I want to show people that bowls is not an old person sport, and that when you join a bowls club it's not just about bowls, but also for the social side of bowls. I had a maximum of 10 minutes, but mine went over by 50 seconds. I had chopped a lot of footage out, but the footage I left I felt was important, so I feel okay about that. For my primary research, I created a survey which was answered by the general public from my class, from the bowls club and from the parish council, so I had a wide variety of answers. For my secondary research, I investigated into the under-25s and some TED Talks about why do people have the biased view. For my codes and conventions, I investigated some famous films and TV shows as I wanted to utilise some of their shots in my documentary. For my secondary research, I investigated into what the under-25s team was. I also got my friend Michael Gom, who is the manager of the under-25s, to be involved in the documentary. I got an interview with him as well. As well as this, I got to interview Tom McGuinness, who is the son of the England team performance director, and he is on his way to play for England, as this year he started playing internationally. I also investigated into what diversity bowls was, and I managed to schedule an interview with my friend Terry Keane, who this year is the president of Bowls England. This will hopefully help when I send my documentary to Bowls England, as if Terry's in it, they're more likely to watch it. This is one of my original goals for Unit 8, and hopefully I'm meeting with them during the Big Bowls weekend. When I looked into the codes and conventions, I analysed the film Transformers, and I investigated into when the main villains are introduced. When the name cards came on the screen, I really wanted to add that into my documentary. Obviously not with the Transformers, but I wanted to add it as I wanted when the people are talking in the interviews, I want their name to come up on the screen in a nice font. I investigated into the title cards to come up on the screen during the interviews, so you know who's talking. I also investigated into Breaking Bad, and when they use POV shots, when the point of view is from an inanimate object. I explored the Breaking Bad movie and found that colour suggests how the characters are feeling. I couldn't really implement this into my documentary, but I learned a lot from Vince Gilligan as I recreated a lot of shots from Breaking Bad in my documentary. My documentary is at a professional standard as I made sure that I was aware of what the generic codes and conventions of a documentary were, and I tried to implement some of those codes. But I also made sure that I put my own spin on it. I added the POV shot from the point of an inanimate object as the introduction for the documentary. The viewer is looking through the metaphorical eyes of a jack, and you get hit by a bowl. The POV shot is effective as it doesn't start in focus, but at the last minute the bowl comes into focus and hits the jack into the ditch, so the camera goes into the ditch. I also wanted to try and recreate the wide shots of Walt's RV, but instead of a drug van, it was the bowls club. I wanted to have a montage of people playing from the morning till the night, but unfortunately I couldn't do that. I added the title cards from Transformers into my work when interviews are happening. I could have added more videos of people playing bowls, as I've got loads of pictures of people playing bowls, but I don't really have many videos of people playing. Next time I'll use a microphone so the audio is better, as sometimes you hear wind during the interviews. I would also use better music for the credits, as I realise the music is sad, and that's not really the impression that I wanted to give. I also need to make sure that the watermark is smaller, as I think it's too big, and I think if it would be smaller, it'd look a bit more professional. My strengths with my documentary were that I had 7 interviews, and I feel like I might have answered the question to the reason why people have a biased view on bowls. In my opinion, if you can answer the question that you set out to try and answer with the interviews in the documentary, then the documentary worked. If you know what I mean. I feel that by having multiple interviews, you get multiple points of view, and I'm happy that I managed to get England players and the president of Bowls England in my documentary. The structure of the interviews was good, and I interviewed the people from Ivor Heath in all their respective fields. Gordon was by the bar, my nan was in the kitchen, and Neil was by the green. I feel like the mid-close-up of Gordon during the interview makes the viewers aware of that he was a bartender without him having to say anything. If you look at the framing of the shot through the rule of thirds, Gordon is in the middle, and either side of him are 2 beer taps. One is the IPA and one is the Foster's. I feel that the close-up was wearing during the interview makes it more professional. I feel like the clothes that I wore during the interview made it seem more professional. That's what I'd seen on the telly, and I thought I definitely need to add that into my documentary to make it seem a lot more professional. And the weaknesses of my production were at some points during the interviews you could hear wind and the audio got distorted. Next time I'll use a microphone to limit the chances that the audio gets corrupted. I think that the watermark is too big, and if it was smaller, I could make it a lot more professional. I think that some of the transitions make the certain shots look unprofessional, as it slightly distorts the screen. Next time I would pick more subtle transitions. This could benefit the production as a whole, as some people can suffer if they see bright flashes of light. And if they have transitions that do that, you could possibly limit my audience that I could have obtained before. I feel that I could have done more research and maybe looked in depth into the different types of being biased. As well as this, I could have tried to arrange an interview with someone who plays in the disability bowls events, as they may have a different point of view to the average bowler. Comments I received from my classmates were that the end of music is depressing. I totally agree, and that is something I'm going to change in the future. They said it sets a sad tone for the documentary. This is the reason it's crucial that you leave your audience feeling the way you want them to. What I mean by this is certain media texts have a certain tone about them, whether it could be sad, scary or happy. I want to convey a happy message in my documentary, but unfortunately by using the music that I picked, I may have left the audience feeling sad or depressed. Sonny stated that the watermark was too big. I agree with him on that, and I think that's something that I could change in the future, as it makes my documentary look a little bit unprofessional. Grace suffers from seizures, and she brought up a good point that some of the transitions have flashing colours, and it could set people off and make them have seizures. That's something I need to keep in mind, and not only for the safety of the audience, but I could be missing out on a lot of potential viewers, as if they suffer from that sort of illness, they're not going to watch the documentary. Some of the good comments that I received were that they liked the fact that I didn't go too in depth into how to play bowls, as some people would have found that boring. I agree with this statement, as that's something I had to keep in mind when making the documentary, as I understand that people find that bowls could be boring, and I want to show it in the best light as possible. So if that means briefly going over how to play bowls and what bowls is in the documentary, if people are interested, they can go into the Bowls England website to find out more. But I really didn't want to bore them, as I wanted them to be interested and intrigued into what bowling was all about, and I didn't want to scare them off. Brandon stated that the interviews weren't too long, and he was happy that the way that the images and videos were overlaid during the interview, so it wasn't looking at someone talking. This is something that I found out during the research process. Is documentaries that were quite successful didn't just have people sitting there talking. I feel like by having images on the screen and by having videos playing, I feel like I'm keeping the audience's attention, especially when it's talking about something like bowls, and people don't really have an interest in that, so I'm really trying to capture their attention. What I found is when people are sitting there talking during interviews, it's normally about 9/11 or the Columbine shootings. They have a sad tone about them, and normally they blur the people's faces out in a dark room, and they use low-key lighting. Whereas in my documentary, I'm trying to show the happy side of bowls, so I'm trying to use a lot of high-key lighting and trying to look people in the best way that they're possible, and I'm really trying to not scare anyone away from the thought of playing bowls. I feel that I've met the goals that I set for myself, as one of the things I wanted to do is try and make the documentary interesting for someone that's never played bowls, and that has a biased view on it. I've shown my documentary to some people that don't know what bowls is, and they enjoyed it, so I feel like I've ticked that box. I wanted to make sure that I represent my club in a good way, and I feel like I did that to the best of my ability. I also wanted it to look professional enough to the point where Bowls England could use it. Someone from Bowls England wants to see it, and I feel like it looks professional enough to a certain degree, so that I feel like I've ticked that box. When it comes to the actual brief, it was supposed to be 4 to 8 minutes long, but I went over that and went to 10 minutes. I know that this is longer than the actual brief should have been, but I find that I couldn't drop out some of the interviews as I had a lot of footage, and I feel like the things that I kept in were really key to the story and the documentary itself. I feel like the footage that I left in was really key to showing why people have a biased view on bowls. I didn't want to cut out the interview with Terry Keane, as I felt that was really important to the story, and I also wanted to make sure that I had the England players, and also I really needed to make sure that I had people from my club, as well as the under-25s manager. These are all key to showing why people probably have a biased view on bowls. It was a bit awkward, but I feel like by going over the limit, I've managed to capture the audience's attention a little bit more, because there's a little bit more information that's in there that wouldn't have been in there if it was to be 4 minutes long. I want to make sure that the credits are interesting, and I know it sounds a bit silly, but I wanted an after-credit scene of Michael just saying, "Don't be biased." But I know that's like the Marvel films where they have their post-credit scenes, and I thought that might be something interesting to add into the documentary to maybe set it apart from other ones in the class. And also, it might keep their... With Unit 8, it's been a big learning curve, because at first I thought, okay, I could probably get it done in a couple of weeks. But when I actually saw how much work went into this production, I was quite shocked. I regret not doing as much work as I should have been doing in the first couple of weeks, because if I had done that, I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. There's a lot of skills that I learnt during this production that I'm going to take into year 2, and I feel like the documentary that I'm going to make for year 2 is going to be a lot better than this one. Next time I need to make sure that I research a lot of different areas of media. I mainly stick to bowls media, and I looked at a TED talk that was talking about why people have a biased view on things. But next time I need to make sure that I look in different websites and different videos that may not have anything to do with bowls, but relate to the documentary in some way. I had to overcome some problems during the filming of the documentary. One of those was actually organising the interviews. I've never had to do anything like this before, so it was a new thing for me to actually interview people, especially as the fact that the people I was interviewing have never been interviewed before either. I'm glad that I've learnt this skill, and I feel like I can develop this skill a lot more during the year 2. And possibly in the documentary I'll make next year, I'll add a lot more interviews, but this time I'll know what to do, or I'll have some sort of idea of what to do. I'm not going to be professional at it, but I'll probably have a better idea of how you do it. When I talked about this task being a bit of a learning curve, what I meant was I've never had to do a piece of work like this before. Whereas the other tasks that I've done during the year, there was tasks involved and there was pre-production that was involved, but there was not as much as this. And there's been a lot of pre-production before I even started filming, and that was something new to me, and I've never had to do that sort of stuff before. Now that I've done it, I know sort of how much work might go into one next year, so hopefully I can take that into year 2 and make a better documentary. I enjoyed going out and trying to find people to sign my survey. I went to local bowls clubs, I went to the parish council, and I went to people around the street. I think it was interesting to do that, as they were all interested to see what the documentary was about. What I mean by this is they didn't really want to do it at first, but when I said I'm making a bowls documentary, they're intrigued to why someone my age is actually making a documentary about this topic. I think that engaged them, and hopefully people will be engaged by the documentary, as it's a point of view that no one else really has, because no one else has made a documentary about bowls being 16. Do you see what I mean? I mean, no one else has got that different point of view that I might have, whereas someone that's 60, they have a different point of view, whereas I'm talking about bowls from the point of view of a 16-year-old, and I feel people might be interested in that because it's different. The general public seem to like the name Don't Be Biased. I think that's to do with the term having a double meaning. The bowls people understand the term biased as it's on the bowl, but everyone understands the fact that people have biased views on things. Whether it's food, games, films, TV shows or documentaries, people have biased views on everything and they don't want to try it and they'll knock it before they try it. And with this documentary, what I'm really trying to show is you should knock it before you try it. I hope that in year 2 I can develop my researching skills and I can develop my interviewing skills, as next year I'm going to make a bowls documentary, so hopefully I can make it better than I did this year, as I've learned a lot of new things and I'm going to take all those ideas and bring them into year 2. I feel like I answered the question as to why people have a biased view on bowls, so I feel like overall I feel that the Don't Be Biased Bowls documentary has come to some sort of a success.